Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to my live stream today. My name is Samantha Heimgartner. I am a high school senior, and I took AP Biology last year, and I'm just really passionate both about the class and about study techniques. I don't really know why. I just really love note-taking. I find it to be fun, and so I wanted to share some of my personal tips and tricks with you guys today. I hope you guys take something away from this stream. This is more intended to give you some options to maybe see if you can benefit from trying something new or incorporating something that I like to do. So just kind of a disclaimer before we begin, I will be sharing some of my note-taking methods, and you don't have to do what I do. You can do what you think works for you. You can incorporate things that I might suggest. Take this as what you wish. I do have a poll set up for how many AP classes you're taking this year, because I feel like a lot of these things can be applied to other AP classes. So I am in 2 AP classes this year myself. Last year I took 3, and I definitely had a lot of overlap with how I took notes for this class, and mostly with how I took notes for AP Euro as well, because that is also a very content-heavy course. If you're in an AP history, I'm sure you will understand what I mean by that. So, before we begin, as always, make sure you're following Think Fiveable, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube. We post some really good memes. We tell you about live streams. What else? What more could you need in life? Am I right? So just a friendly reminder to make sure you're following us. All right, so in this stream, like I said, I'll be talking about some of my note-taking methods that can be applied to both AP Biology and a lot of other classes, whether they're AP or not. I'll be talking about some study strategies that I like to use, and some resources you can use, and some tips and tricks for studying as well. So my first method of note-taking, also as you can see, I included some pictures of my notes as well. I know they're not probably the best quality, but the idea was that you could kind of see the format of the notes, the content, and the colors matter so little for this purpose. I just kind of wanted you to see what they look like overall, just to provide a visual, because as I will say probably a million times in this video, I am a visual learner. But anyway, my first method of note-taking is what I call like a simpler format or bullet points. And as you can see, I have my title at the top of the page, and then I have a main title written under that in a certain color pen. And again, there is no reason that you would have to use different colors or special pens or highlighters or anything for any of this to be effective. You could do everything in pencil and it would all work the same. I just like to do it with ink because that's my preference, and I like to use different colors because honestly, that's how I get myself to look at my notes again. But anyway, so for my bullet points, as you can see, it's typically a bullet point per concept. You can use subpoints for more specific examples, and something similar will come up in other note-taking formats as well. This one is really easy to integrate diagrams, and you can also use, like I said, you can use different colored pens or highlighters, or you can even underline or italicize or write in cursive for emphasis, but it is not necessary for the effectiveness of this method. The recommended use of this method, I would say, would be for lecture notes. So again, this would depend on both the class and the teacher. So this was my main method for lecture notes for AP Euro, actually, because that's how my teacher taught. She just lectured at us. So you jot down bullet points. And this can be used both handwritten or digitally, which will also come up later in the stream as well. And I also think this is good if you know that many diagrams will be used, just because I think it's easier to incorporate in this one than some of the other ones that may come up later. I would say this is probably not the best option for textbook notes, if that's kind of the route that you'll be taking in your class. My AP Biology actually was a lot of textbook notes. We had a lot of assigned readings, and that's actually why I have so many notes. I think I have like 70 pages of AP Biology notes, but most of them came from textbook readings, and I'll show you my favorite format for that. But this can be applied to that. I just have another favorite that I like to use. Another con of this is that, as you can see, especially from that first one on the left, it is very, very word heavy. Like there are just so many words there, and it can be more difficult to find a specific concept within the broad concept. So if I wanted to look for a specific idea within gene expression, it would be a bit harder for me to find versus some other methods that I'll be showing as well. But if you do have it highlighted or in different color, that could help counter that difficulty as well. So next, this is my adaptation of the Harvard outline. And so as you can see, I kind of have the structure for the official Harvard outline laid out. So where you have your Roman numeral as your main topic, and then you have subtopics, and you can keep indenting more and more for details and examples, and you just repeat. So I don't know, this one is really tricky. I know, like, I feel like nobody uses this, and I think it's super helpful. I love using it to plan out essays. So if you're in AP Lang or AP Lit or in any class that requires you to write a lot of essays, this is actually really, really good for essay planning, or any sort of outline. Really, I'm actually reading off of a Harvard outline for my talking points for this stream because I really like it a lot. It's just easy for me to read, easy for me to find where I am. But I can understand why this may be difficult for some people to keep up with, especially if you're in a fast-paced environment like lecture notes and you're constantly making subplots and then you have to go back and start a new main point. So that's why this recommended use, I would say, would be for textbook notes. And the reason I think this one is really good for taking out of a textbook is because you can transfer headers and subheaders really easily. So for example, my main topic is obviously cell membranes. And then I have that highlighted portion at the top. That is my main topic. That was the first main subheader, if you will, for this chapter of textbook notes. And then my next subtopic was that next subtopic within that. And then I have my content. And then I can keep going in for more details or examples. Actually, another issue I have with this Harvard outline is that I've heard it said multiple times that you shouldn't do another sub unless you have 3 points to make. But I think that's BS. I think if you have an example that you want to add and you want to add it as a subtopic because that's what makes sense to you, don't feel like you're not allowed to do that because you don't have anything else to say beyond that for your subtopics. Like, it's more important to include the information if it's going to help you later. So I don't understand that. I think that maybe would have originated from like essay planning, where it's like, don't go into detail if you don't have enough evidence to back it up, I guess. But for note taking, I would say kind of disregard that. So in case you hear that anywhere else from anywhere else, just disregard that, because also at the end of the day, these notes are for you. So unless your teacher collects them and makes you take notes a certain kind of way, these notes are for you, for your understanding, for your studying purposes. So it's really just whatever works best for you. They do not have to look pretty like mine do. Like I said, I just do it because I find it to be fun. This is how I get myself to look at my notes again, but they're for you. So if you can understand them, if it makes sense to you, that matters above anything else. Anyway, sorry for getting on that tangent. But to finish up with this Harvard outline, I also like this one because it is easier to find specific ideas because the topics are typically more organized within those subheaders. So if I wanted to find something about the phospholipid bilayer, I would know that it's within that first point because it talks about phospholipids right there in the subtopic one, that first letter. Also, this one is really good to incorporate diagrams into. So that works too. And this one is tricky because, like I said, it's harder for lecture notes because it is a more rigid structure. So if your teacher doubles back and mentions something that would be better in another subpoint, but you don't have any space, it's harder to go back and add that information. Also, if you're revising these notes and you're using them to study, again, it's difficult to kind of go back and add information in. As you can see, I don't really have a lot of margin space in here. But again, if you want to tweak it so you give yourself margin space because you know that's something that you'll do a lot, that's another method that you could do. Otherwise, I might revise with a sticky note and just write a note on a sticky note and stick it right on top, because then I can read the words underneath and it's right there. So again, whatever works for you. Also, you can get this structure on digital note taking. So if you take notes on a laptop, you just go to your bullet points, your drop down, and you pick the Harvard, or I think it's called Harvard, but you'll find it with the Roman numerals. So you can easily type like this as well if you decide that you do like this. And obviously, if you're typing with this, then you can go back and add information. So that's definitely nice. And then the last note-taking format I'm going to be talking about today is, again, my version of Cornell Notes. And I'm going to assume that you guys have probably heard of Cornell Notes. I know I had a teacher that tried to assign us Cornell Notes to take, and he gave us a whole note sheet and everything. And that's my biggest pet peeve. I want to be able to take notes how I want to take them. But I did actually kind of grow to love this structure. And so this one is really unique in that it uses 2 columns. And so the left column is the main idea or the concept, or what I like to use it for, the vocabulary word. And then the right column is the content or the definition of the word, or you can include diagrams and examples, as you can see in my example here. And then the idea of Cornell Notes is that at the bottom you save some space and you write like a 2 to 3 sentence summary of the notes above. So that way when you're flipping back through your notes, you can read the summaries and kind of have a good refresher of what the notes are about. I personally don't do that because I find that to be more of a chore than anything else. I find that to be difficult and I don't like it, so I just don't do it. But again, it's all up to you. If you think that works for you, then great, go for it. That's awesome. Like, I know somebody who, whenever she has to read a book for an English class, she writes a 1-sentence summary for every page she reads of the chapter. So then that way she can read a paragraph about the chapter she just read. And that works really well for her. So great, whatever floats your boat. This is, again, what works for you. I'm just trying to present what works for me. So my version of Cornell Notes, I like to use them a lot for study guides, as you can see with this one being a study guide. This was a unit study guide last year. So I took the sheet that my teacher had given me to study off of, and I transferred it to this note page. And I just used any concept or vocabulary word that I wasn't completely sure on, and I just rewrote a definition or drew a diagram so I understood. I like it because it's a really, really nice visual. It's not as busy or word heavy as some of the ones that I showed previously. And also you can find information very easily, because if I want to look up what hydrolysis is, like I can see right there, like, oh, that's my vocab for hydrolysis. Whereas I'm not skimming through lines and lines to look for that keyword. Again, it works great for vocabulary. I love using this for vocabulary, actually. Also, I think that's also because I'm not a note card person, but if you're a note card person, again, go for it. That's great. But I like to use this for vocab. And it does also work with diagrams and processes, and you can adapt that to how that works best for you. However, the downside of this is, again, the structure, because it is a very defining structure and it is rigid, similar to the Harvard outline. It's more difficult to go back and add information after the fact. And I mean, you do have more blank space with this because of the columns, but it's not a lot to add. But if you're the kind of person that would be willing to write in that blank space to draw on arrows and stuff like that, then again, this could really work for you. I don't want to mess up my aesthetic of that note, so that's just not something that I would do. But again, you could use sticky notes, you could make a new page, you could do whatever floats your boat, again. Also, just know that, as you can see with my note sheet as well, the columns don't have to be 50-50 split. They don't even have to be like a 30-70, which mine are here. You can make the columns split however you like. Actually, I think of all of the Cornell type notes that I've done, this is probably my biggest right side section. I typically make it more 40-60, just so I don't feel overwhelmed by how long I have to make my lines, I guess. And so I can have more space for bigger vocab words. But again, whatever you decide for that. I also just wanted to talk about using diagrams in your notes, because I feel like this can be really tricky for some people, especially if you're not an artist, which I am not an artist, you guys. I know these, I'm actually really proud of these diagrams. I don't remember exactly how long it took me to do these, but it probably was not my first try. But I remember both of these concepts were more difficult for me. And so because I am a visual learner, I thought that doing the diagram would help a lot, and it definitely did. So there's a lot of different things to talk about with diagram use. And the first one that I wanted to bring up was drawing in your diagrams or printing them and pasting them. So obviously, if you're taking digital notes, you can't really draw it in unless you're planning on printing that page and then drawing it in, which is definitely an option, just not something I would do. But if you're doing paper notes, then you definitely have equal opportunity to either draw it in or to print and paste. As you can see, I prefer to draw. And I think that's just because I like the aesthetic of it more. I don't really like gluing things into my notes, and I feel like labeling it becomes a bit more difficult. When I draw my diagrams, I usually just kind of copy out of either my textbook or I'll Google search an image. So again, your preference, they're both options, but I prefer to draw, but either would work. I don't see an issue with either one. Maybe drawing would help you solidify it a little bit more, but I don't know. I don't know that that's the case. Secondly is labeling. So as it may seem, it looks like all of my diagrams are labeled. But if you look really closely on my DNA and RNA page, I actually don't have the, so if you look at the DNA replication diagram, the one right above that of the, why am I blanking on what they're called? That's not a polypeptide chain. The saccharides? I don't know. Wow. It's been a while since I've taken biology, guys, but that diagram is not labeled. Or the phosphates, triphosphates, I don't know. I'm so sorry, guys. It's late. I'm tired. Anyway, that diagram is not labeled for each part. I could still tell you what each part is, and that's exactly why I didn't label it. Because personally, I try not to waste my time taking extensive notes on content that I feel comfortable with. Just because it's like, don't study things you don't understand. Don't spend time reviewing things that you know like the back of your hand, even though that's the easy way out. So I just didn't take the time to label that because I knew if I saw the visual, I would know what it was and I would know what each part is. But I did struggle with DNA replication a little bit more and remembering all the enzymes and the different strands and stuff. So I knew that labeling it would be really important to me, and it did help me out a lot with that. So I'm a big fan of labeling, especially if it's something that you're confused about. And then, as you can see with my other page of the cell structure and the organelles inside the cell, that was another really good one for me to label, because I didn't really get a chance to learn all the cell organelles, and I realized that the exam actually did want you to know a lot about them. So when I was studying for the exam, I decided to do a review of those organelles and label what they might look like inside the cell. And the reason that I found diagrams to be so important is because you will 100% see a diagram on the AP Bio exam. More likely in the FRQ section, but also very possible in the multiple choice. I have also seen it where you will have to label the exam or write down what the arrow is pointing to. So I just think that that's really important as well, so I can have that visual, so I can understand what's going on in that sense as well. I would just be really surprised if you didn't see a diagram on the exam, like they're everywhere. Um, Another thing you can do is you can also color code your labeling, but I didn't really do that. Some people like that aesthetic. Some people find it easier to point to what is what with the different colors. And again, if that's what floats your boat, awesome. It's not something that I did because I didn't feel the need to. All right, so before I move on to study tips, I want to know if you guys have any questions with how I take notes, how I use notes, formatting, anything like that, because I'd be happy to answer them. And if not, then we can move on to the study tips section of the stream, but just let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to take a quick drink of water. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so I'm going to go ahead and move on. Oh, okay, sorry. How do you deal with the vast amount of content? That's a really good question because, yes, AP Biology is really, really content heavy. I guess my biggest tip is just to tackle a bit every night, which you'll see come up later. But I am a very organized student. I usually do all my homework on time. So I keep all my notes, I keep all of my labs and everything, and I just try to review. I don't know if that really answered your question, but it's hard for sure. AP Biology is really, really content heavy. The biggest thing is to know the broad key concepts, take notes and ask for help. A lot of these things will come up later in the stream and I hope can apply to that question. But yeah, that's for sure difficult. Yeah. So good question. I feel you. I do. Like I said, I have 70 pages of notes and some of them are repeats because I had to review content because I wasn't 100% on it. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the study tips part of the video, but if you have any more questions, I'll be happy to answer them. All right, so these are some of my biggest study tips, and I am going to go into detail with each of these as well. Sorry. Okay, so the first bullet point is the Pomodoro method. And if you have not heard of the Pomodoro method or have not tried it, it's essentially a time management trick. And I guess it's been scientifically proven that the most effective amount of study time to study break ratio is 25 minutes to 5 minutes. So you study for 25 minutes and then you take a 5-minute break and then you repeat. And when I first heard that, I was confused because that seemed like a really small amount of time to me. I'm the kind of person that when I get in the groove, I can just hammer out a bunch of stuff. And so this may not work for everyone. I use it sometimes if I feel like I have a lot of different things to compartmentalize. If I have a lot of smaller assignments for a lot of different classes, then I might use this. I typically don't like to use this for big projects, but sometimes I do and it is actually really helpful. So if you have not tried it, definitely try it. If that is a really small amount of time to you, you can also transition it to 50 minutes and 50 minutes studying, 10-minute break. Although I've also seen 45 minutes studying and 15-minute break. Again, this is another thing that you can kind of use to what you want to do. It's all about what works best for you. And then there's a lot of really cool apps that utilize the Pomodoro method. My favorite one is called Forest. Disclaimer, it does cost $2, I think, $1.99, but I love it a lot because you set a timer, and it can be for anywhere between 10 minutes and 2 hours. You set a timer and it plants a tree. So it plants a little tree, and you cannot use your phone during that time or any other device that you're using it on. So you can use it on an iPad, or you can even use it on Google Chrome so you're not opening like other distracting tabs. And if you do use your phone or open the tab or whatever, then you kill the tree. If this is an issue, then you can set it on a setting where you can still use your phone and it'll just kind of track the time studying. Because then once you grow your tree, you kind of get a collection of forests and you can tag what time was being used to work on what. So I like to go back and see how much time I spent studying for the AP Hero exam last year, or even the AP Biology exam, or how much time I spent on AP Bio labs. And it's really cute to have the little collection of forests. You can use coins that you earn to buy more trees. You can get friends. You can even use coins to buy real life trees that they'll plant, which I think is really cool. However, if you don't want to pay $2 for that, which is totally understandable, there are free versions. So you can get an app called Focus to Do, which is really similar, where it tracks your productivity, and you can set a Pomodoro timer. So it'll tell you when your 25 minutes is up and when you can take a 5-minute break. There's also an app called Flora, which is really, really similar to Forest, but it is free. And I don't know if I don't use Flora. I've never used it. I do have friends that have used it, and I've really enjoyed it. And then again, if you don't even want to download an app, you can set a timer on your phone for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute break. I personally just really like the apps because then I can track my productivity. Or if you just are using a computer because your phone is in another room, which is even better, you guys, you can use a website like Marinara Timer or Tomato Timer. All you have to do is go to Google and just type in Pomodoro Timer, and a million things pop up. So there's really, really good resources for this if you want to give it a try. The next thing I wanted to talk about was digital versus handwritten notes. And I feel like this is a really heavily debated topic, I guess, in the studying student community. There are a lot of strong opinions about this because there are legitimate pros and cons to each method. So I just kind of wanted to go through a few of them and how I use each one, because I kind of do a weird mix of both sometimes. Although I will say I do lean towards handwritten notes, which you could probably tell from some of my earlier slides. So for handwritten notes, it's better proven to help you retain information to write it down than it is to type it. It's generally easier to incorporate diagrams in there, because if you're using a document, sometimes it messes up the formatting. You know what I mean. It helps you be more engaged in the content or in the lesson, especially if this is like a lecture setting that you're taking the notes in. And of course, every teacher is different. So maybe that's not even an option. You don't really have any teachers that lecture, and that's fine. But still, it helps you not be so mindless about taking notes, I think. And you can make them look really pretty if you want to, like I like to, but again, not necessary for effectiveness. However, some cons, it is definitely slower than typing. Your hand can cramp. And if you are in a lecture, it can lead to missed information if you're writing quickly and you miss something and forget to write it down. And of course, that could be problematic. It does typically require some organization skills to keep handwritten notes. I don't know if you could tell from my notes, but they were actually written on loose leaf paper and kept in a binder. So that way I could organize it by unit and subject. But if you're not organized, it could help you become more organized. So that's a pro as well. And then again, if you have all your handwritten notes in one place and you lose them, that's not great. But then again, if you're organized and you don't ever lose them, then you have them all in one place. So that's a pro and a con in of itself. And then also you do have the option of taking all your notes in a single notebook, or taking notes on loose leaf paper and organizing it within a notebook or a folder, or your preferred method. Whereas digital note-taking is faster, can usually be accessed across multiple platforms, so a laptop, a phone, a computer, library computer if you're using Google Drive or something like that. So that's always really, really nice. Or somebody else's computer if yours is dead. You can add information or revise really easily, because all you have to do is press enter and then start typing. So that is for sure really nice. You can search for concept, Control F, search for vocabulary word, and it's all right there. In my opinion, though, it's more difficult to label a diagram. Like you can't, unless you are inserting an already labeled diagram, you just don't really have that option. And if you're inserting a labeled diagram, I feel like you're kind of losing the point of labeling a diagram. But that's just me. Again, you can draw in the diagrams if you decide to print the notes, but again, to each his own. But digital note-taking can also, like I said, lead to mindless note-taking. So if you're really fast at typing, you can listen to information, type it down, and not really take it in. So that could be harmful. It's also easily distracting if you're taking it on a computer. I mean, how many jokes do we see about college students that are in lectures and online shopping because they have their laptop out? So that's just another point to bring up. And obviously there's so many different word processors that you can use, which is always really nice. You know, there's Google Docs, Microsoft Word. If you are the kind of person that is curious in taking notes on an iPad, then you have the best of both worlds for digital and handwritten, and you have apps like Notability and GoodNotes. But that is a completely different discussion that we do not have to get into. Next, this might seem like a really specific thing to talk about, but I just want to talk about highlighting really quick, because I feel like I have seen so many misconceptions of highlighting where people literally just highlight everything because it looks nice or something. And that's so harmful, because if you highlight almost everything, then your brain is not going to be able to distinguish what's important and what's not. So just to know what to highlight. And I know that's really not helpful. I typically like to highlight just things that stand out to me or sentences that make everything click, if that makes sense. Or what I will do if I know it's going to be really content heavy. This is something I did more with AP Euro, but can definitely be applied to AP Bio. I made a color code, and I used 3 to 5 different colored highlighters. And that way I was able to filter the information based on what lens I was going to see it through. So for example, you could have a color that's about cause and effect / processes for AP biology. So if you wanted to write about the process or read about the process of cell division, and you're reading like the stages of mitosis, you might do that cause and effect line or 2 with that yellow highlighter, so you know that that's cause and effect. And then when you have new vocabulary that you're not familiar with, you pull out your orange highlighter, so you know that that's a vocabulary word and a definition. If there's a chemical equation for when you're learning photosynthesis and cellular respiration, you pull out that pink highlighter and you highlight that chemical equation. So then that way, even if there's a lot of content on your page that's highlighted, you can at least distinguish the information instead of it all being one color. But if it's not going to be content heavy, maybe try to stick to one highlighter. Again, this is to each his own. And the color code is more applicable to textbooks if you can highlight. I realize that sometimes you don't have the rights to highlight in a textbook, and that's fine. But you could even do that in your notes, or if you wanted to print a PDF of the textbook, if that was an option, you could do that. So just a tip that I wanted to share, because I feel like a lot of people don't do that, and I found that to be super helpful. When I take notes, what I personally do is I will highlight headers and sometimes vocab, but typically I'll just use a different colored pen for vocab and or to underline words or concepts in my notes. So I typically don't do a lot of highlighting within my notes, just because that can be distracting. And then different colors for the highlighting, like the color code, that can definitely be utilized for diagrams as well, kind of as I mentioned earlier. So if you wanted to draw an organelle in your diagram purple and then write the name of it in purple, great. Like that could be helpful too. Okay, my next point, this might seem really obvious, or maybe not, or maybe it's weird, I don't know, but a really good study method, I think, is to explain it to somebody. And this works super duper well in biology. So if you are still, this even works better if you're still confused on the topic, which I know that sounds weird. But let's say you're confused about cellular respiration and photosynthesis, because I know I was. What you need to do is grab your notes. Yes, bring your notes. And explain it to somebody who is even more clueless than you are. and try to convey it to them as if they're about to take a quiz on it, and have them ask you questions when they're confused, when there's a gap in your explanation, because their questions will force you to clarify. Their questions will probably be really similar to your questions, and it will force you to look back at your notes and become more confident with the information. I find this to be really useful. Um, it can be really frustrating depending on who you ask. I would say maybe go to a parent or a friend, hopefully not a friend that is not an AP Bio or has not taken it. Although if they have, that can also be helpful because they could help you out. But the idea is that they are more clueless, so they'll ask questions. You could even do it to a sibling or a non-biology teacher. Just anybody that will sit down with you for a few minutes and let you explain a concept to them. And again, this might not work for you, but this is something that I find to be really useful. And then the last one, that one really seems super obvious, but guys, just ask for help if you're confused, because it is totally okay to be confused. Like, how many topics did I just admit to being confused to in this stream, in this 36 minutes that I've been talking to you? So there's no shame in it. You're never going to improve if you don't ask. And there are so many resources out there. Ask a friend that is in the class or has taken the class. Ask your biology teacher. Ask anybody here at Fiveable. We are happy to help. Google, textbook, notes, anyone that can help, ask, because it's not going to hurt. It's only going to help. I promise. And then lastly, some advice. And while I'm going through some of this stuff, feel free to ask me any more questions you might have from anything I mentioned from this stream. Again, I'm happy to answer and talk about any more note-taking strategies that I may have glossed over or that you may have questions about. But so here's a bit more of my advice that can definitely be applied to any and every class that you're taking this year. First, try to study every night. And I'm going to be honest, I don't always do this because it can be hard if you're overwhelmed with a lot of assignments and projects to do and you also want to sleep. But if it's a lighter night for homework, take out your notes and read through them for 10, 15, 20 minutes, however much time you want to spend. Because the more you do it, the better it's going to be cemented in your mind. And the more confident you feel, and the better you'll do in the class and on the exam. Because honestly, confidence is key. I always second guess myself, and that's typically where I get points off. So if reading more every night will make you more confident, that is going to help you a lot. So if that's a possibility for you to study a little bit every day, I would say definitely try to incorporate that. For practice questions, this is another way that I found myself to improve a lot. I am not the best when it comes to standardized test taking because, questions are very specifically worded. It's not always easy. So I improve by practice. And there are a lot of different resources in which you can get practice questions for AP Bio or any other AP exam or really any class. These will be more specific to AP classes though. But you have your classic prep books, your Barron's, your Princeton Review, any other ones that you can find. You have your AP Classroom. That's a new thing this year. I honestly still haven't even used it because my teachers just haven't used it for my classes. But that's supposed to be a really good opportunity for you to have some AP style questions. Another good resource is albert.io. I may have talked about this in my last stream as well, but this is a really cool website where they give you a bajillion practice questions per topic within your AP test, your AP class. And they give you a lot of FRQ questions as well, all different formats. The only thing is that albert.io will not grade your FRQs, but guess who will grade your FRQs? Fiveable. So you could totally utilize that as well. Or you could, of course, ask your teacher if they'd be willing to grade it for you. It is possible to ask your teacher for past AP exams. What my teacher did last year is in April, when it was starting to get closer to the AP biology exam, she had a requirement that we had to take 2 full-length practice exams from previous years. So I think I took the 2012 exam and then maybe like the 2014 exam. And then you could take more for extra credit, which of course I did. I found to be incredibly useful. You start to learn how they ask questions, what they ask, and what the right answers may look like. You also start to learn about your pacing, because that is also super important when taking an AP exam, which I'm sure you know. But especially with those longer FRQs, that pacing becomes really important because you want to make sure you don't run out of time. So your teacher may or may not have access to past exams. Doesn't hurt to ask. If not, you can also find them online on the College Board website. I just am not entirely sure where you would find answer keys for that. And then lastly, this one might be a little more difficult, but you could always make a quiz for yourself. So you could sit down and make a quiz one night of a concept you don't really understand super well. Use your notes to help you make the quiz, make answers that are going to trip you up. And then a week later, or whenever you feel is necessary to take it, but give it some time so you don't automatically remember all the right answers, take your quiz and see how well you have retained and improved your understanding of the concept. Or if you feel like you're going to know all the answers, have a friend and yourself swap quizzes that you made for each other. And then that way you can practice both making a quiz, which will help you make connections to correct answers and misconceptions and generally just time with the concept. And then you'll get to practice taking a quiz based on the same or a similar concept, or however you decide to do that. But that's something that I think could work really well as well. And then lastly, review vocabulary and key concepts. Like, that's going to help you way more than memorizing processes, which sounds really weird. But if you can understand the general concept of cause and effect instead of memorizing every step of a process, that's going to help you out so much more. Because AP style FRQs, they're going to ask you what will happen if something is gone. They're not going to say, please describe, well, actually they might, but it's less likely that they're going to say, please describe the steps for meiosis. They're going to say, what happens if, you're missing a sister chromatid for meiosis. That's a really bad example. They would never ask that, but they're going to ask about dysfunction, because they want you to understand the cause and effect of processes, of big things. Ecology-wise, like, understand what a keystone species is and what would happen if they suddenly go missing, instead of memorizing the rules for food webs and keystone species and such. So memorization, it works great for vocabulary, but not for key concepts, if that makes sense. I really hope that does, because that is my biggest piece of advice for AP biology students, is to understand the general concept and not memorize, because that will be your biggest downfall, in my opinion. All right, so before I end this stream, just another friendly reminder to follow Fiveable. We're always giving away swag too, so you can win a Fiveable t-shirt or pen or stickers. I got mine. They're pretty cool. 10 out of 10 would recommend. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them. But for our upcoming AP biology streams, we have a stream about tonicity and osmoregulation, cell compartmentalization and its origin, and then our Unit 2 review. So definitely make sure you're tuning into those. We have some great content coming up from great, super knowledgeable streamers. Thank you again so much for tuning in. I really hope you learned something and can take away from my preferences, I guess. But until next time.